Imagine if you already had stashed Isaiah Likely, Jordan Mason, J.K. Dobbins, how different your team would look and how you wouldn't have to rush to the waiver wire because you already got that breakout on your team. In today's video, we're talking about the beat the breakout type players, bringing you 10 plus guys. And when we started off in just the guys that should already be rostered, you guys already know this. Braylon Allen, I know he's probably locked in your league, but 100%, if he hasn't already been stashed, goodness gracious, go get some Braylon Allen, especially after what he did with the Jets. Demarcus Robinson should be another guy who's going to be the clear one for the Rams. We don't know how that's necessarily going to go out. I'm going to talk about the Ram situation a little bit later. Jalen Nailor, who's going to be the clear two with Jordan Addison out in week 3. Jalen Nailor has had a pretty productive fantasy football season up to this point. Tyler Johnson's the next guy also in this Rams wide receiver core is going to be the number 2 is what it's being projected. And then of course, Bucky Irving, who had an amazing week 1, but nothing ever really translated into week 2, but we still have our eyes on this Tampa Bay Bucks overall offense. Now, getting to some running backs that you need to be stashing in today's video. First guy is going to be Ray Davis for the Buffalo Bills. And we've seen how desolate the running back position can become when you have some of these handcuffs. And Ray Davis, 3 fantasy points in week 1, 3 fantasy points in week 2 if we're talking in full PPR, only had a 10 and 31% snap share, only had 3 attempts in week 1, 9 attempts in week 2. So you're going to say to me, Caleb, why are we banking on Ray Davis? Well, Ray Davis did not get amazing draft capital, but he is the clear 2 behind James Cook. And this offense for the Buffalo Bills, the whole identity has kind of turned around the James Cook rushing efficiency, this whole entire rushing offense. And so I'm not saying that Ray Davis is going to have any standalone value. I mean, up to this point, he hasn't, but I definitely think Ray Davis is a guy that you need to be potentially keeping your eye on for a stash, because in case something, knock on wood, were to happen, but we do know these boys are playing football. We've seen a crazy amount of injuries so far. Ray Davis would be the first player that I am looking to stash. The second player that I'm looking to stash is still going to be Jaylen Wright for the Miami Dolphins. And the part about Jaylen Wright that we did not get to see an amazing outing in week 2. He had a 24% snap share. Raheem Mostert was out with the injury, but it was the whole Devon show on Thursday Night Football when Tua did get injured. Only put up 0.4 fantasy points. So you're going to say to me, Caleb, why are you excited about Jaylen Wright? Jaylen Wright hasn't produced. What do we need to do to really consider Jaylen Wright? 5'11", 210, runs a 4.38 40-yard dash time. And especially with the fact that we have Tua out for the next few weeks, this rushing attack is going to have to step up for the Miami Dolphins to have any sort of offensive success. And so I think it's going to be a lot of Devon. I think it's going to be a lot of Raheem Mostert, but those guys haven't been able to stay healthy through a full season up to this point. We just see it with Raheem Mostert. We haven't seen it fully with Devon. I know it's been 2 games. It's been good. I absolutely love Devon. He's a league winner, but Jaylen Wright's definitely a guy that you need to be consider stashing later on your bench. And especially if you have a Devon, Jaylen Wright should already be rostered. The next guy we're going to be talking about is Isaac Guerrero, who is the backup running back for the San Francisco 49ers. And it was just a few years ago when we saw the San Francisco 49ers go through a boatload of running backs. Just think of the Elijah Mitchell year when Elijah Mitchell, as a rookie, wasn't supposed to end up being the league winning running back that he was. Now, Isaiah Guerrero, 6 foot, 221, so he's got the great size that we like, a 4.33 40-yard dash. So he's an absolute burner. Out of the University of Louisville, had a really great production profile as a senior in college with 132 rushing attempts for 810 yards, 11 total touchdowns, 22 receptions, 234 yards. So you're going to be saying to me, well, Caleb, we got CMC, we got Jordan Mason, absolutely emerging. Yes, I know all these guys, these running backs that I'm talking about, they're handcuffs, because if they weren't handcuffs, they would already be picked up. You're starting them in your lineup this week. You guys all saw how quick Cam Akers was to get picked up in your leagues. But Isaiah Guerrero has the necessary type of athletic traits that we'd like to see, that if for some reason something were to happen to Jordan Mason, if you own Jordan Mason this week, I'm 100% making sure that I have Isaac Guerrero onto my lineup, especially if it's a little bit of a deeper league, just to kind of balance myself out if something were to happen. And like I said, I'm not trying to say for all 3 of these running backs, the only way that they provide any type of value is due to injuries in front of them. But I do think we have to, at this point in the season, we've seen an intense amount of injuries. We do have to kind of level ourselves with that. Now, bringing you some wide receivers that I would be stashing. The first guy is going to be Jordan Whittington for the Rams. And honestly, Jordan Whittington had himself quite the preseason. Drafted round 6 out of the University of Texas, 6'1", 205, a 4.52 40-yard dash. Nothing super impressive. You look at his college profile, nothing impressive, but Jordan Whittington did flash during preseason. And, you know, we talk about all these guys. We can go back a few years, or Marquez Callaway, or we can just name a bunch of guys. Like last year, Puka Nacua kind of flashed in the preseason, but there's been a lot of hit or miss players in the preseason. But I think Jordan Whittington is finally getting his opportunity as a clear level starter. We got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua both set to miss at least the next 3 to 5 weeks. And so that's going to just open up this opportunity for Jordan Whittington to really get his time to shine. shine. And I know a lot of people are in on Demarcus Robinson. A lot of people are in on Tyler Johnson, but Jordan Whittington will be playing in the slot. And this Rams offensive line, absolute cheeks. So what I think that's going to do for Jordan Whittington is he's going to burn a lot of short routes, and Stafford's going to be looking his way. So Jordan Whittington is the guy that I personally want to be owning in this lineup. I know Demarcus Robinson is definitely owned and stashed in a lot more leagues, but Jordan Whittington is my first wide receiver that I would want to stash. Now, moving on to my second wide receiver that I want to stash, it is going to be Michael Wilson for the Arizona Cardinals. And I know there's a guy named Greg Dortch in this offense, but if we look at the peripherals of Michael Wilson Jr., 7 fantasy points in week 1, 5 fantasy points in week 2, 80% snap share, a 68% snap share over the last 2 weeks. He's only had 2 targets in each of those games. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. needed to get going in week 2. We understand that. Trey McBride needed to get going as well, but I do think Michael Wilson is more of a prototypical wide receiver for this offense than a guy like Greg Dortch. And so I know it's going to kind of be the Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson debate for a while, because Greg Dortch did have a great week 1. He didn't necessarily have the best week 2 when he only put up 3 fantasy points. So Michael Wilson's another stash. Would be having him if it's a deeper roster, if I need some wide receiver help, had a lot of injuries. We talked about this guy last week. It's going to be Luke McCaffrey for the Washington Commanders. And this passing attack has been, I think the word that I would use is very college-like, but Luke McCaffrey did have a 56% snap share last week, 4 fantasy points in week 1, 0 fantasy points in week 2. So we got a lot to consider here with Luke McCaffrey going forward. Like I said, he wasn't targeted against the Giants. And he played in a healthy part of the snap. So you're going to say to me, Caleb, that seems like waiver wire bait. I mean, he's got the pedigree. We talked about him last week, has the draft capital out of the University of Rice. This Commanders team is desolate of wide receiver talent. I'm definitely still considering some Luke McCaffrey if I am needing it. My next guy that we're going to be talking about is going to be Xavier Legette for the Carolina Panthers. And the Carolina Panthers making this quarterback change, I believe that really does help Xavier Legette. It helps his offenses, because they would not have made this call if they didn't think Bryce Young was absolutely stinking it up. And he had a 59% snap share and 7 targets in week 1. Now, he was drafted in the first round out of the University of South Carolina, 6'3", 227. I understand 0 fantasy points in week 2. You're like, Caleb, like, why am I? Like I said, these guys, the reason we're stashing them is because they are on the waiver wire and they are deep level targets. So I'm just giving you a bunch of guys, and you guys can determine which of these guys that you might want to target for elite level upside. I do think these guys do have upside, but Xavier Legette, like we said, with Andy Dalton going into week 2, I think there is some things that can be exciting. Now, moving on to the next 2 tight end targets that we're going to be talking about, it's going to be Theo Johnson for the Giants. Theo Johnson, 86% snap share in week 1, 79% snap share in week 2. Only 2 fantasy points in week 1, 0 fantasy points in week 2. So, like I said, he dominates the tight end reps in week 1, but then absolutely, he dominates the tight end reps in week 2, just absolutely sucks because he can't get the ball, even though Malik Neighbors did pop off. So this passing attack, I think, is really coming together in its own. Like I said, I don't typically like to stash tight ends, so I just want to provide these 2 cases unless you're in a super desperate situation. But Theo Johnson is potentially a guy that I would be looking to stash going forward. And then the next guy that I'd be looking to stash going forward is going to be Jonnu Smith, who is a starting tight end for the Miami Dolphins. And we know that when you add a guy like Thompson in at quarterback, and they're looking like that at this point, they haven't made any moves to go get another quarterback. 11 fantasy points is what he put up in week 2. He's going to continue to get target because a starting level quarterback, what do they love? That if they're inexperienced, they love their tight ends. And that's going to be Jonnu Smith, who we did like his profile a lot over the last 2 years. He just hasn't been able to produce consistent fantasy football points. Last week only had a 42% snap share. So if he can get that snap share to continue going up, if he can continue to get more targets, I think Jonnu Smith can be a very interesting stash for you. So if you like fantasy football, if you like stashes, hit that like and subscribe button. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Check out these 2 videos if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.